Good morning, Shadow Eater here, one angry pagan. Now, this is going to be this one's an evolution of. This is part of my series on my evolution of my political thought and my religious thought, but this one's going to be more political. I've been working really hard in trying to pin down exactly what my political ideology really is. And I call myself a heathen socialist, as I said in my last video. Now I want to kind of expound a bit upon that. When I said that my heathenry, my paganism, informs my socialism, it's like an organic socialism. I understand. I see the inequalities going on around me, and therefore I want to deal with those. I want to find a way forwards, rather than seeing us carry on the same route. And in doing so, I look back as well as forwards, and looking around me, and looking back, there was, before feudalism, there was a sort of egalitarianism that I wonder if it wasn't for the reintroduction of Christianized Rome and its imperialism, I wonder how that would evolve. That would have evolved. It's annoying because one of the things that's really missed out here is that the imperialism of the West, especially of the Western European nations, let's take Britain for example, right? So you have the Celts here, whether that's the Gaulish or the Gallic or the Brittonic, and you had the Romans come over, and then they left again. True Christianity stuck around, but when the Germanic pagans moved in, oftentimes the Celts had asked them to come over, just like with the Romans. And I don't want to idealise Anglo-Saxon Britain, because it wasn't a utopia. Obviously not. I mean, that would be a ridiculous sentiment. But there was... but again, before the reintroduction of Christianity, of an imperialistic Roman Christianity to the British Isles, just for example, just in particular, it's one of those pillars of imperialism, especially in Britain. And you see it develop very heavily. I mean, it's one of the things that the colonial powers in the West really relied on was their Christianity, was their Catholicism or their Protestantism. And when I've done my own research on Roman history as it pertains to Western Europe. There seemed to be, before it became Christian, whilst it was hardly perfect. They were more in their polytheistic ways. They were more accepting of other cultures. They were less discriminating of other cultures. Not non-discriminating. Don't be absolutist about this. Just less discriminatory. And once they became Christian, it was you have to believe in God. Like the Christian, the tearing down of the sacred tree, the Wodan's tree, or Wodan's tree. It's this mindset of. It's why I don't like monotheism as a whole. People wonder. You might wonder why I mix religion and politics, and a lot of you might not like it, but I'm sorry, but you can't deny that there is a connection between the cultural growth of a society and its connection to its religion, and then its connection to that state's politics. And I'm sorry, but it's undeniable that one of the staples of the Western Christian powers was its Christianity. A lot of the atrocities were done under the name of Christianity. It formed one of its pillars. Now, I'm not saying that all Christian sects are this way. I'm just saying that the Western version of Christianity, at least, is like this. It's very pervasive. And it's very nasty. It's why I don't like. It's why I find conversion a passive-aggressive thing. I find it. Whereas most people, especially in Britain, they don't think much of it. For me, I find it an attack, passive-aggressive attack. I'm like, you can fuck right off. It's the same thing as a Tory turning up my fucking door. But yeah, it's getting off the point a bit. Again, bringing it back to socialism, the way I think about it, and the way things have, and the more I learn, I see that I like I said, the paganism informed my initial thoughts on my politics, or at least on how I viewed the world, which was then how I developed my politics. And even that is still evolving. My religious, the way I believe, the way I think in terms of religion. But coming back to socialism and politics, the more I learn, the more I see that whilst electoralism is right now what we can is the best. Basically, electoralism alongside direct action is what we can do right now, but that can't be it. I will vote Labour. I will vote progressive parties. I will continue to vote, but it can't be seen as that this is the beginning and end all. And at the same time, my scientific mind comes into this. Now, I know Marxism is scientific communism rather than utopian communism. But I have an argument with, and I am willing to be brought on to debate this with someone who's likely to know better than me, and I'm more than willing to accept being wrong. But it seems to me that the way that I think and what I know about evolutionary science and how my thinking on that applies to cultural and societal evolution, socialism and even communism can't be an end all. It's always going to be a transition to the next best thing, and I wonder if there is some thought to which. This is why I prefer to call myself a socialist rather than a communist. I don't have that many arguments against Marx, really. I wasn't a Marxist. No, I saw myself as like I said, this organic socialist in a way. But again, it's evolution of thought, isn't it? It's all comes down to evolution, really. But the more I learn, and the more I find that what we learned in the West about how socialist countries actually work is starkly different. Whilst I'm still not entirely convinced that Stalin was an actually good man, I still need to be convinced on that one. I'm no longer convinced that he was an evil man. Again, I'd have to debate on this, and I'd have to be convinced on this, but in either way. But again, coming back to it, I think there needs to be a conversation amongst us on the left of what comes after a socialist/communist revolution. Once we get rid of class, what happens after that? And what happens after that? Is speculation gone into how detailed is the speculation that's gone into it? This is one of the questions that always pops into my head. This a similar question to me. To me, it's in the same line as a question of what is biological life going to look like in 50,000 years. I'm just as fascinated. But in the material, that I can say that I think I am becoming a Marxist. I would consider myself a heathen Marxist. Of course, a heathen socialist, but in which type of socialism? I am convinced of Marxism on the round. I'm just not an absolutist, so and a lot of the reading I've been doing has convinced me of Bevan, an Iron Bevan. He gave Britain its route to socialism. There are a lot of people on the left that are like, well, we need to move to, and I'm one of those that are saying we need to move to something more like the Nordic model. And yes, for right now, yes, materially, right now, yes. But that can't be the end goal. Moving to a classless, moneyless society, what happens? How do we envision the future? This is my main question when it comes to communism, or in its absolute, in its different different versions of it. What happens going forward? How does I get the critique of calling stereotypically calling Soviet and Chinese states as being, or any socialist state really, as being authoritarian, but largely because of, you know, how the West behaves. But are we neo-socialists, you could say, neo-Marxists maybe? Do we need to find a way forward? That's why I call myself a Bevanite. Being a British socialist. I guess the reason why I say Bevan, well, the reason why I begun to, I kind of idolise Bevan. I don't really want to go into personality politics, but if I was to idolise anyone politically from our history, it would be an Iron Bevan. Because, well, for a couple of reasons, really. You know, he played a big role in the 1926 strikes, general strike. You know, it disgusts me that Winston fucking Churchill is the national fucking hero. It really gets at me. Why? Because when the argument is brought up of him being a racist, which he fucking was, it was, oh, that was the period of the time. Bullshit. Oh, how can you call bullshit? And Nyron Bevan called him out as a fucking racist. Even back in the 20s and the 30s, he was against he was anti-apartheid. He was caught, you know, his major bust up with Clement Attlee was over over the colonies and over Attlee's, you know, residual imperialism. Attlee was a social democrat, whereas fucking Bevan was a full socialist. So I will not take an argument of you know, oh, it was just the attitude of the time. No, that's fucking bullshit. Because the attitude is still around now. And there were people back then, just as now, arguing against that racist bullshit. It was more predominant back then. This is true. But it's becoming predominant again. This is why, again, social democracy, liberalism is just... okay, liberalism and social democracy are transitions from what we've been through. We need to get past this neoliberalism. Really need to get past it. Because otherwise, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And being the non-absolutist I am, I can't tell you just how much it'll get worse. No, it could bring around Ragnarok. You never know. No, so my argument, but again, a lot of the way I think politically and religiously is evolving. It's born originally from the way I think about science, and my area of science is biological evolution. I'm still to this day obsessed with dinosaurs and prehistoric life, and what is life like going to look like going forwards. I apply that thinking to humans, because we are also animals, but we have this superiority complex, which I also attribute a lot to monotheism and atheism. I have many critiques of atheism, but this video is not the video for critiquing atheism. But yeah, I know, once again, this is a bit of a mess, but I hope you kind of gather where I'm going with this. Like, I think I consider myself a Marxist. But I'm not sure yet. I can't consider myself a communist. Not really. Not completely. Again, I'd have to debate someone who is a communist to be convinced either for or against. And that kind of physical interaction is not. I'm not likely to come across that. I'm more likely to come across right wingers and liberals than anything else down there. Like the there are leftists here, but communists, I'm not sure. As in southwest England, I mean. But yeah, it's just capitalism is not the right way forwards. Social democracy is a transition point to socialism. But what comes after that? What do we look like going forwards? It's something that my brain keeps coming back to. No, one thing I wanted to add, going back to the pagan point, the heathen point, the polytheistic attitude of, it doesn't matter what god you believe in because there are many gods. I actually look at that as a similar attitude to how the USSR, in a way, this is at least in its beginning, looked at the different ethnic areas, the different oblasts. I can't remember the proper terminology now. Were treated, given their own autonomies. I see a similarity in thought processes there. So I'm not sure. And reading Belfort Bax, I don't agree with Belfort Bax's anti-feminist stance, but his piece, The Pagan Socialist, 1912, it did speak to me a fair bit. You can find it on Google Docs. That actually spoke to me. Pagan Socialist, Belfort Bax, Belfort, Belfort, Bax, Bax. It at least a good portion of that piece spoke to me, and I can't help but think, given the numbers of, especially on the left, of people who are pagan, but when I bring up the subject of, just for example, say I asked some more prominent YouTubers who are backers of Labour, should the Labour Party appeal to the pagan community? I get other pagans going, what would they offer us? I was like, well, given the Green movement and Labour do seem to be wanting to make moves into the Green movement, does it have to be the Green, just the Green Party that's left to soak up those votes? Just saying. Full recognition and legalization of paganism as a religion. Alongside, given that our peoples have a sizable community that's comparable to that of Sikhs in Britain, they're recognised, we aren't. It's kind of ridiculous. But again, it's not about superiority here. I'm not trying to say that paganism or polytheism is actually superior. It's just another way of thinking. And in some instances, it is better. I can be given, there are probably arguments I could be given where polytheism probably has its downsides, but again, I'd have to be brought on to debate that. I'm more than willing to do so. But when I get told that reform is bad, or reform is the only way, on either side, either extreme, you're both wrong. Trying to say that reform is useless and trying to say that reform is what is the only thing we need, both arguments are bullshit. Because of the absolutism in those arguments. It doesn't work. We need to use reforms as part of a route to transition to socialism. Bring the Overton window back from the right to the centre and then to the left. Bring the public to a point where, like I said, it depends on where you are. I also say it depends on what your culture is like, what your people are like, and how your people think. This isn't a racist point, by the way. It's not based on skin colour. It is purely based on culture. For example, the Soviet Union, it tried to catch up to the West. It caught up to the West in 30 years, 40 years. But given that it didn't have the hundreds of years that we had to develop, the military might alongside the military and industrial might, and an economical might alongside the cultural might, I can see why a socialist revolution in the way it was needed, in the way it was with the Soviet Union. I won't say that they were wrong. I cannot say that the Soviets were wrong for doing it the way they did it. The evidence just, Lenin was right, Trotsky was wrong. But on the other side of the argument, electoralism is useful. The problem with it is always, and everyone knows the problem with it, especially in this country. Just to give a British example, is the Labour Party brings in some fundamental changes, and then when people forget why they knew Labour had to be brought in, and they end up voting the fucking Tories back in, the Tories start dismantling it fucking all. Just like, there is a futility to using electoralism as a be all end all. That doesn't mean to say that I believe in an authoritarian state, because I believe in a Wotan system, a Neo-Wotan system, I should say. In, decisions are made by councils that, I suppose even going forward, actually thinking about it, electoralism might play a role going forwards anyway, even in socialism, as a part of socialism. It's treating electoralism as an absolute is the problem. I think that given that one of the big differences between the development of socialist thought at the beginning of the last century and this century is the difference in population. I think it's a huge factor. And I'm not just talking in material terms, in terms of numbers, but in the diversity in the way that people think now. It's even more diverse. In some ways there's some paucity, but in others there's even more diversity. And I'm telling you now, as soon as people, as soon as we get, we transition to a socialist society, it'll start branching off in all sorts. Socialist thought will start branching off in all sorts of different directions. It will it's just natural. And how can I tell? Because of the way I have studied life history on planet Earth. It will branch. You can, again, I would be happy to argue this point in a debate with fellow Marxists, because capitalists just won't fuck. I mean, it's fine, I will argue it with capitalists, because you need to try and convince these assholes, but I'd love to debate this with fellow leftists and Marxists, because this is one where I think I haven't seen enough thought, I haven't seen any videos actually really being put into this particular subject. And I'd love to talk about this. I've spent a fair bit of time thinking on this, and even though this video might seem messy, I hope you kind of get in the fact that I'm starting to coalesce my political ideology. Am I Marxist? Yes. I'm a heathen Marxist. I'm a heathen socialist. But I think I'm a Bevanite Marxist. And there's the evolutionary science aspect to that as well, which I can't help but say is part of the way I think politically. Yeah, one thing that also, I have to add that whilst my obsession is paleontology and archaeology, one thing that has to be noted is that it's not that I don't recognise the imperial usage, the usage to what the imperial powers put to, including America, paleontology and archaeology, horrible practices. And I'm glad that we are finding a way forward when it comes to archaeology and paleontology. We're not entirely there yet, but we are finding genuine ways forward. And I think that's a promising area, a promising area of a body of work to look at when it comes to interculture educational cross boundaries between educational institutes and between different countries. Again, I probably haven't got the right words, but it's looking at how paleontology behaves now with a pluralistic look. Like, personally, as far as I'm concerned, all the stuff that does not belong here needs to either be asked for permission to be kept here or sent back to where it originally came from. And people will tell me, well, what about our museums? We've got our own fucking history that's just as rich as the rest of the world's. We seem to forget that And I also blame that on an imperial Rome. That's why I'm not a big fan of Rome, as you might be able to tell. So yeah, there's probably going to be more videos on this. This is gonna be a series, I think. The evolution of my political thought, and I am beginning to coalesce around and solidify my thought around what I actually believe in. I'm against the markets. You need to phase out the markets. The workers need to be, the bourgeoisie needs to be taken care of, and the proletariat really do need to rediscover their own power. And as a last point, because this video has gone on for long enough as it is, we need to try and conceive new ideas going forwards. The reiteration of a point I was making earlier, I know, but I think it's rather important that we on the left, especially those further on the left, those harder left, and communists, Marxists, and the whatnot, we need to conceive new ideas going forwards. The material differences, in a Marxist sense, the material differences between then and now do play a role in how we must think about moving forwards. I'm not saying that everything is different. There are many things that are much the same, that where what Marx and Engels said then is applicable now. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that not everything is applicable, and we must look to conceive new ideas moving forward. Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Bax, Bevan, even these people were men of the time. This is an argument. This is one of those times where that argument is more appropriate. They were men of the time. And I know it seems hypocritical to use it, but this is actually I believe a situation where the argument is appropriate. And given how far we have how far we've both advanced and become programmed, especially in the West, there is a need, I think, to conceive new ideas moving forwards. We need socialism, especially communism, needs to evolve, and again, I would be happy to debate this with people who likely know better than I do when it comes to classical Marxism, Leninist, Marxist-Leninist literature and stuff. But I do think this is a legitimate argument that many on the left don't take into consideration. So yeah, I do believe that electoralism works. But it's only, it can only work as part of a machine, and even then, once we move into the classless side of things, Do we need elections? Well, if we're going to have councils that are representatives to try and organise things, we can't just see these people as, make them the replacement for the bourgeoisie. They need to be workers. The representative side of things needs to be their second job. Or it's a job that they do alongside, a normal job helping everyone else. So, this is something that needs to be thought on. So yeah, I'm not, absolutely, electoralism is not the be-all end-all, and we can't just continue to sit on our haunches and rely on it. Direct action is also needed on different fronts. Paganism, I think the pagan community can and should be brought into the socialist fold a bit more. We should try to there should be some thought put into that, because I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and there are just way. I did a whole video on it a while back, and there are just way too many links between the two. So yeah, I'm ambivalent on electoralism. It's a tool. I can more certainly say that I'm a pagan socialist, a heathen socialist, and I would say that I'm a Bevanite Marxist. I have evolved. My political ideology has evolved. I can quite confidently say that I'm a Bevanite Marxist at this point. Once again, I would like to at some point talk to people who know better than me on the subject. I would like to debate this. I think some of the points I make are actually decent points, but what do you all think? Let me know. This is more of the Shadowita side of me rather than the one angry pagan. And Shadowita being shadow wise man, shadow counselor, shadow advisor. So I do think that I'm not. I can't be entirely wrong with this. Let me know. Let me know what you think. So yeah, God weird. See ya. And blessed Thursday, people. Good fate to you all. And blessed be. From Shadowita, Freya, Lady Sif. Good day, peoples.